Welcome back, everyone. Today, we get to start our new topic, gender, one of the options in your A-level course. Let's get right into it. This is a quick overview of the entire chapter. We'll lay a foundation with defining what sex and gender is, move on to what androgyny is. We'll be looking at atypical sex chromosome patterns, not just your XXXY, but maybe XXY or other forms. The entire bottom section is dedicated to explaining gender development, i.e. the cognitive theories and the other theories, primarily the psychodynamic and social learning theories. Then we'll be looking at how culture and media affect gender roles, and finally we'll be looking at atypical gender development, i.e. something called gender dysphoria. In this topic, we'll be dipping our toes into many of the aforementioned topics a little bit. First, we'll be defining sex and gender, looking at gender dysphoria, which we'll come back to in the last topic actually, looking at whether gender is something that is flexible, with a case study with the so-called Batista family. We'll define what sex role stereotypes are, and we'll be looking at the role of media. So we're basically covering the entire chapter by skimming through all of the sections now. So first of all, let's get some definitions down. What is sex? What is gender? When we say sex, we refer to the biological differences between males and females. That is the physical appearance, but also on a genetic level, it refers to your sex chromosomes. So your XX for females or XY for males. When we talk about gender, it refers to personality traits that are considered to be either feminine or masculine. For example, masculinity is perceived to be somebody who's athletic, analytical, makes decisions easy, while feminine would be gentle, understanding, compassionate. Those are just some examples. But these are stereotypes. They are defined by culture, and they can vary between cultures, and they generally tend to be associated more with one of the sexes than the other. That is our starting point. Now, having a definition for gender brings in this interesting question is, what if your gender, so the character traits you identify with, do not correlate with your biological sex? Meaning, what if, for example, you are born as a man, but you feel like the ascribed stereotypical behavior for a man doesn't match you? Like, it's traditionally, for example, men are not supposed to show emotions, but what if you are a very emotional man? Vice versa, what if you as a woman are quite tomboyish or like to do a lot of sports or are very decisive and assertive, right? So what happens is that people experience something called gender dysphoria, where their biological sex doesn't match their gender identity. And this is the starting point for a whole flurry of discussions around topic of gender identity versus biological sex. Let me tell you a little story of a family from the Dominican Republic that had 4 girls, and they were raised and treated as such. When the girls hit puberty, they turned into boys, so they actually grew penises and testicles. The boys quickly adopted their male gender identity and continued living as males. And so the conclusion from this is that gender identity seems to be flexible, because they were first born and treated as girls, but as soon as they turned into boys, they were able to adopt their new gender identity, meaning that if they are able to transfer their identity from being a girl to a boy, that means that gender identity is not biological. It is a cultural, it is an artificial construct that we adopt and that can easily change, right? So let's look at the biology. What did actually happen to these girls and then boys? So the boys were actually born with an XY chromosome. So they were actually born as males. But there's a rare genetic disorder where the hormone dihydrotestosterone wasn't produced during prenatal development. So prenatal means before birth, and so they had insufficient amount of this particular hormone, and that hindered the proper development of their male physical characteristics. So, as it says here, this caused the male genitalia to be hidden inside their bodies, and only during puberty was the hormone produced again, causing then the growth of the penis and the testes. Okay, so only later on did it become apparent that they were actually boys. Fascinating. So, by the way, this is dihydrotestosterone. So the counterpoint, so the idea here being that, is gender identity flexible? Can we simply adopt a different gender identity, right? And the argument here was to say, yeah, actually, look, they were first girls and then they turned into boys and were completely fine. Well, the counterpoint to this is that actually the Dominican Republic is quite the patriarchal society, right? Patriarchal means that there's a bias towards preferring males, and that males are viewed as more valuable as individuals. So the Batista boys, from the name, the Batista family, were described as little miracles, right? That they turned into boys, as if they now are better human beings. That's just, I'm putting it over the top, but the conclusion here is to say, well, of course it was easy for them to transition into boyhood or malehood, because basically they now had a better identity, right? It was more, males are more accepted within society. Of course they would be happy to be boys. And you could make the argument, what if they turned out first to be boys and then they turned into girls? Would the transition be as easy as the other way around? Interesting point, right? So that might have helped their transition in terms of gender identity. But still, despite the fact that the Dominican Republic is a patriarchal society, they still managed to do this without feeling uneasy or uncomfortable with their new identity, right? So that could have also been the case, that they grew in penises and testes and they felt like this was weird or unnatural to them, or they felt not like they were themselves. That could have also happened, but it didn't. So the argument still stands that probably gender identity is a social construct that we can change. Let's talk about something really important that will become central over this chapter. It is the idea of sex role stereotypes. When we say sex role, what we mean is that we assign a certain expectations, so these are our stereotypes, to a particular sex. As we can see here, this girl is pretending to cook, and this boy is playing with blocks or Lego, or, this are our typical gender, these are our particular sex stereotypes. Now, these expectations are now transmitted through society via parenting, right? We will treat girls and boys different. We will not say usually we don't say to a boy, "Oh, you're pretty." We'll say that to a girl, and we'll tell a boy that he's strong and whatever. And that different treatment then leads to kids also then behaving differently and wanting to be in different ways, right? And so the kids are just kids. They absorb whatever is around them, and how they will, pay attention to how people are treating them and what they are being praised for, right? And so the kids develop along the sex role stereotypes that we assign them. So are sex role stereotypes fixed? And the obvious answer is no. Of course, you can have a man or a woman with the opposite stereotypical personality traits, let's say a sensitive man or an assertive woman. They're just traits, character traits, and all humans have these traits, just in different quantities. And so obviously we can change them around. And society has also changed quite significantly over the last few centuries, or even just a few decades, right? So the next question is, can sex role stereotypes be damaging, i.e., should we change them? And the obvious answer is yes, of course. Women usually are, in the majority of the world, at a disadvantage because most of the world is patriarchal, meaning they prefer men. And so in terms of, for example, being hired for a job or being paid a certain amount, women have been shown to have less of an opportunity and be paid less than male counterparts. And that is something that our society is struggling with today in terms of getting equality in the different domains of life. And as you'll see in the rest of this topic, we are all part of the problem and the solution. For example, media plays a big part in these sex role stereotypes. A study by Fernham and Farragher, 2000, looked at TV adverts and looked at the sexual stereotypes displayed, and they showed that men were shown to be in more autonomous roles in the professional context, while women were more seen in familial roles and in domestic settings, right? And so just from the ads, we are being fed a certain stereotype that is particular for each sex, and therefore that's our normal, right? And we will then integrate that or make that into who we are, because we will then try to aspire towards what we see around us, like on TV. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we drop a new video. Download these and many more slides for free, and consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to detailed mind maps and past exam revision content. If you're a teacher, get free access to ZenTeach, an online quizzing tool with ready-to-go multiple choice quizzes and automated feedback. Make sure to use this invite code, which is, like all links, in the video description below.